Welcome to Conversations with Educators, where we bring educators from across the country to talk about topics like college and career readiness, graduation tracking, teacher growth, assessment coordination, and more. Let's get started.
Well, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are, and welcome to our Conversations with Educators series with Education Advanced. And we are so excited to have Dr. Capps and Brian back with us from the Danielson Group, along with Amy Stock and I. We are all former educators and love to share information. And so we're glad to have you today. We're gonna just take another minute. I know we've got some people signing in, and we will get things going. I'll go ahead and pull the PowerPoint up and share my screen here. So it is Happy July.
Well, August, actually.
Actually, yeah, you're right. It is August. Thanks for that, Brian. I was like, how can it be August, right? So today's conversation is on leveling up learning and exploring collaborative inquiry, which is a passion of mine because I love collaboration. It just makes such a difference in the journey of continuous learning and continuous improvement. So we're going to go ahead and introduce everyone. Brian, do you want to go ahead and start off, and then we'll just make sure everyone's ready to start a conversation.
Sure. Hello, I'm Brian Johnson. I'm currently the Director of Learning at the Danielson Group. So it's a pleasure to be with you all today to talk about, again, ways that we can explore, maintain, and improve collaborative inquiry with teachers and administrators.
That's
Thanks for
great.
having us.
And I'll just quickly follow up on Brian's intro and say current and ongoing forever director of, that all of a sudden gave me a little quiver. But anyway, I'm Lee Capps. I'm happy to be here today and just excited to talk about what we at the Danielson Group feel is just an undergirding pillar of any successful professional learning system. And we believe that the framework offers an incredible opportunity to support that collaborative inquiry. So excited for the conversation.
Okay, Amy?
Hi, Amy Stock, a 15-year public education educator before I joined Education Advanced. I'm very excited to learn a little bit more last webinar with the Danielson Group, so very excited to see where this road takes us today.
Yes. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Kim Tunnell. I have been with Education Advanced for 4 years after serving 35 years in public education, and just passionate about learning and supporting teachers and administrators. And like I said, this is an exciting topic that we're going to dive into today. So the way we're going to go through the process is we're going to discuss some guiding questions, and at the end we'll have a live Q&A that you can put some questions in, and we'll answer those and use our panelists to share their insight. We thank you for taking the time for this 30 minutes and hope that it's beneficial for you. So here's our guiding questions for today, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about all 3 questions, and then we'll dive in because I'm going to turn the PowerPoint off so that you can see everyone's faces. So first question we're going to talk about is defining collaborative inquiry and why is it so important in the educational setting. Then we'll dive into what are some of the necessary conditions for schools to consider before partaking in the collaborative inquiry, and then what suggestions can you make for peer-to-peer collaboration, which is just so powerful. So we'll go ahead and start off with that first question. So Lee and Brian, what do you think about collaborative inquiry? Why is it so important?
Well, there's just so much to say about it, Kim.
Yeah.
I am going to try to really practice my never-ending goal around my economy of language. But I will say, one of the undergirding principles and assumptions that the entire framework for teaching is based on is this big idea that Charlotte put out into the education landscape way back in 1996 that really summarizes the work of so many, just Piaget, Vygotsky, Dewey, that learning is done by the learner. And when you start to really tease that statement out, it touches upon all the things I think we currently are after in reaching our students. The idea that we need to engage them cognitively always, but also we need to engage them socially, and we need to engage them in a way that allows them to act on their learning. And when you think of the word collaboration, all of those things happen more richly when you are in a space of collaboration. So big picture, to me, I think, again, we fool ourselves if we try to make learning a singular only activity. But I think it also speaks to the last part of the question we'll talk about is there are times when that's necessary to support collaboration. So, Brian, I'll pick it up with some very specific ways that we see this as a real critical piece that schools, districts, organizations get right in making sure that it has a identified place in the professional learning of educators.
Thanks, Lee. So I wrote down just a few things that I think are just very important for us to consider when we think about collaborative inquiry, especially it's been what we considered one of our spheres of influence of how we think professional development has to occur in any school or system. So the first is we have to think about a problem of practice. Across, grade level and content area, there should always be something that we're struggling with, grappling with as educators that we want to make better. The second is time to actually investigate, having the opportunity to step back to say, let's see why in period 3 or in 7th grade or in the math class, we're having this issue around how students are thinking about variables. And taking the onus, not necessarily just on the student or the teacher, but more as an experiment, a way to think about a hypothesis. If I try X, maybe I will get Y. Or we've been doing X, why is the outcome this? So that leads to kind of an inquiry or an investigative mindset or stance that we have to really endanger in our school systems so that it doesn't become, well, I'm struggling at this skill, I'm going to be silent, but I would love for my colleagues, I would love for my peers to help me or see if they're also are having these same issues. And the last, I think, is generative. We have to think about not just only naming the problem of practice, but what could be a future state? What could be solutions that we would want to have in order to try to, again, amend or make that stance better? So those are kind of the things that I think, and it really goes back into culture that we have to have administrators, coaches that model these sort of dispositions and ways that we think about collaborative inquiry in order for teachers to feel really comfortable engaging in that kind of work.
Yeah, taking
Right,
that risk. Yeah.
Kim, can I just add quickly on to what Brian
Sure.
said? Because I think what he did, I'm sure very intentionally, was he took that concept of collaboration and by adding the inquiry to it, he gave the collaboration purpose.
Mhm.
It allows those of us who are on the call today to think about that in a really important way. If this is something you want to put into your systems, to have it a part of. The notion that we're inquiring about something is what has often been missing in our PLCs and why they did not save us in the realm of professional learning. So I don't want to miss that critical piece that he just identified for all of us on the call, is that the inquiry part is the purposefulness of bringing teachers together and the learning that happens. So I really appreciate that.
Yes, and I was thinking the exact same thing, Lee, about our PLCs. You know, we set those up and we look at student work and all that, but do we really inquire and have that problem in practice? And is it purposeful in that? So thanks for sharing that, because that was the first thing I thought of was we do a lot of PLC work. And so is it really leading towards that inquiry-based program?
And the thing, right, and what we do then in education is we make the PLC the problem.
Yeah.
And it's a structure. In our world, it has to be happening at some point during the day, that there is an opportunity for teachers, educators, school leaders, et cetera, to come together. And we make that the reason it didn't work.
Right.
And so I think this conversation is just so important. As we realize again that it wasn't the wrong solution, it was the wrong process.
Right. Absolutely. So
Also,
that's a good takeaway, is to evaluate when your staff is getting together. Are we modeling it? And do we have the agenda for those PLCs that are actually going to encourage the inquiry? Go ahead, Brian.
Oh, I was just literally going to about to say that as well. But I think even on top of the agenda is sort of, are we sharing responsibility on like a cycle of inquiry? So is it the grade level coach? Is it the lead teacher? Is it that every teacher leads one or two of these inquiry PLCs? But again, it goes to the structure of ensuring that the power, the efficacy lies within hopefully those that are with the students, or also if it is the AP that is in charge of ELA or in math, that they are also helping to build the kind of coalition of teachers to be able to talk through these principal decision making decisions and being data driven about what they're seeing in the classrooms.
Yeah. It's hard to refute student work. So the evidence is student work and teachers sharing and reflecting and looking at that student work really helps with that inquiry process as well. So great. All right. So let's talk about the conditions. What is it that we can do? What are the conditions that I think we've already mentioned a couple of things, but what do you see in that realm for encouraging collaborative inquiry?
There's so many things that go into that answer, but if I could be, as succinct, we talk a lot about the Danielson Group around trust and building trust amongst the teachers to be able to share candidly successes and also struggles. I think there is an empathetic stance you have to have when any person is talking about their craft, and a kind of criticality to know that even our most advanced educator will have some type of problem of practice or something that they would love to investigate more. And that really does become, to me, what, one of our last sessions, we talked about what does excellence mean? And I think that is really what the mindset is. When we become an excellent teacher, we're thinking about our continuous improvement and the tweaks and the small adjustments that need to be made per period, per classroom, per year. And then the last is the modeled and dedicated time so that teachers are not rushed. It is very hard to have a successful collaborative inquiry or PLC if it's only 20 minutes, or it's when the teacher is right in between their next prep period, giving them the opportunity to really try to be as fully present and engaged in the process before they have to move to the next classroom or they have to be pulled for lunch duty, which I know is a very tall task to ask just based off scheduling in, from elementary all the way to high school. But it's about really respecting the profession and giving the opportunity for teachers to be able to practice the reflective muscle and muscle memory to really think about, how they can improve their units and their lesson plans and just their daily instructional and pedagogical practices.
I'm
Absolutely.
going to just pick up on that for a minute, because I do feel like what happens is, again, the lack of a structure where this can happen in a time period that's needed for any of us to engage in some thoughtful work. And so trying to problem solve around that time barrier is where I do feel the idea of the condition of how do we set up teachers for success in those professional conversations? Do we give them an opportunity before the PLC to know exactly what they should look over and what they should come prepared to talk about? Which is where I do think, the notion of technology comes in, and honoring the individual learning that some people need to be able to go into that PLC time feeling confident. And to go back to Brian's point about trust and empathy, for some of us, it is something we yearn for. And for others of our educators, it isn't their favorite time, perhaps, but I think it's because we don't set it up for success.
Yeah.
And so I think, again, that goes back to the condition, in my opinion, of what is pulling all of this together for teachers? What is making that time seem not just worthwhile, but actually advancing my work, making what I have to do day in and day out more doable. I feel better about it. All of the things we want educators to feel, because it indicates the mindset that Brian just talked about, that this isn't an end goal per se. It is the way I think about why I love my job.
Right.
And I know that, again, some of this feels very big, but I think we're at a moment where we have to commit to the very big in order to address the crisis we have right now about filling our classrooms with teachers who are confident and ready to meet the needs of the kids in front of them. So
Yeah.
important.
Yes. And that trust and relationship, building that culture of collaboration is so critical, like you mentioned. And it's really, we talk about professionalism, but do we really value professionalism? And that whole, I think we're shifting into more of that principled teaching, that it's really important to have that dialogue, to have that time and structure, and then to have the culture around that. Inquiry is what keeps us going. It's like the ahas that we want our students to have. Those ahas come from a very rich, valuable inquiry process, and it really is more motivating and keeps teachers and educators going. So yeah.
I keep thinking of the word intentional, especially now in August, when more than likely your PD has already been planned for the back to school time. But if it hasn't, this is where we start as leaders in districts and campuses and teacher leaders. Are we being intentional with what we're preparing for the entire year? Because it is all year. It's not just the 2 weeks before school starts. It's, have we created pockets of time all year long, a system in place to be able to revisit, come back, build that trust back, go back to our mission, go back to our focus, adding in that inquiry based. That's what keeps kind of popping in my mind, is getting that ready and really setting the tone all year long.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Our last question is about peer-to-peer collaboration. Because again, if you've got a trusting environment and relationships are built and the empathy's there, that peer-to-peer collaboration is such a value. So share with us some of your thoughts on that.
I think peer-to-peer, I, again, I think in modeling, that is what I think administrators, coaches have to do first. And in that modeling, they also have to kind of know their staff and know their teachers. We talk a lot about knowing and valuing students, but I think there's also a notion around knowing and valuing your staff and who has certain strengths, who has certain attributes that you want to amplify in your school, who become really good planning partners. And that could be, again, across, grades. It could be, the grade team, and understanding what the dynamics are. And again, as we think about back to school, and if you have new teachers to your district or you have returning teachers, there's a whole chemistry and dynamic that I think we often decide they'll figure it out mid-year, or let's just get through the logistics of the first few weeks of school and then it will gel. But the intentionality around building relationships with the teachers really will help facilitate how they share lesson plans, what they give to each other. So I would say first step is really getting a very good understanding of what are the dynamics in your school, in your grade level, and across the department first, before we can even delve into the academics of professional learning in that way.
Yeah, have to have the relationship first. Lee?
And I also think this is where technology can play a really important role. Time is everybody's demon, and in education, it becomes the reason why so many things never are able to be actualized. But if we can pair people up and they can have this type of a conversation as part of an ongoing inquiry, where it might be harder to get the whole team together. But again, I think it goes to supporting the intentionality of why. Why
Mhm.
would they find the 30 minutes to connect with each other or to go in and do that module that is part of their learning system, learning opportunities before they have the discussion about? And I think, again, you mentioned this concept of principled teaching. I think, again, it has got to be a part of the solution to how we are finding teachers experiencing their work, feeling supported in their work, and what it is doing to outcomes for kids. And so, to Brian's point, we do work with districts to try to set these norms, and it's all done with collaboratively learning about the components of the framework. And so, to Brian's point, if you're thinking deeply about what does it mean to know and value your students, you're more likely to think deeply about how do you know and value your educators, so that you can, again, symmetrically do for your teachers what we expect teachers to do for their kids. And so if we could help anyone figure that out, it would be, fabulous. And I
Yes.
think there's many pieces to that level of support in a system, but they're doable. They are doable. Last thing I'll say, and it goes back to this word, like words that stand out to me today in this discussion. Amy, I agree with you. If we can identify why something we're doing is intentional, you will automatically have so much more buy-in. And that means connecting it to a coherence that makes teachers feel like someone knows why they're being asked to do the things they're doing. And the other word would be, Brian, that word you mentioned a couple of times, of generative. What collaborative inquiry done in a supported, intentional, purposeful way becomes its own engine.
Yeah.
And the work creates the next, inquiry. So it's
Yeah.
it's a huge return on all the hard work you put into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's kind of been the theme throughout the whole series, is intentionality and just building in and having that principled approach and focus. It made me think, you know, the peer-to-peer collaboration. So in my district, we had like the campuses had a pineapple chart, we called it up. And so throughout the inquiry process in their PLCs, they would talk about, hey, I'm going to be doing reciprocal teaching, or I'm doing Socratic circle. And so a pineapple chart, there's templates, you can Google pineapple chart and find it. But we had one of those up, and it's really where teachers advertise things that they were trying or things that they were sharing. And I'll tell you, we gave teachers time off to go in, and so there was a schedule posted every week. It was so impactful and life-changing, because what they saw was, oh, that was such a great idea. And so then when they got together in their PLCs, the dialogue was so great. And I think a lot of times we're so isolated in our classrooms that getting in and seeing the practice and seeing different strategies make such an impact. And then I was consulting in a district, and they had a stoplight outside the door, and it had red, yellow, green, you know, and the red symbolized don't come in, because it was just a free flow, or yellow was I'm working on this. I'd like your feedback. And the teachers would go in and make observations and leave notes, and like you mentioned, Lee, use technology to kind of give feedback. And so I think opening those doors, not only emotionally in the meetings and the intentionality there, but also opening the classroom doors and letting peers go in and out of classrooms and get ideas. It just changes that whole motivation and the value. So those were a couple things that I just think are so impactful for peer collaboration.
I would also just add, you know, when we think about domain one, planning and preparation, I think PLCs are just prime for us to really talk a lot about the resources that we're using, applying the knowledge in content and pedagogy. And the schools that I've seen really thrive in an environment where PLCs are a very critical part of their culture, it's where the administrators, the coaches, teachers enjoy talking about their instruction.
Yeah.
And you can only really enjoy talking about your instruction when you have approaching being a master of, or you have been doing, you know, the same curriculum for a while, where you kind of know the ins and outs. So I also would say that a part of the culture and the systems and the structures, it's creating an environment where people love to talk about, you know, the Socratic seminar.
Yes.
And the structures of it, where people love to like read through, you know, the math problems that they're working on. They are doing them together. They're discovering kind of new misconceptions, or, you know, it's a very much be the mathematician, be the reader, the learner as the student, that I think makes PLCs enjoyable and fun, outside of we might have to do this because there's a problem in practice, but it elevates the conversations, what teachers get to engage in once they really have mastered the text and the task of the assignment of the unit or the curriculum.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Okay, well, it's time for our live Q&A. So we'll let you just add down at the bottom there if you have a question that you would like Lee or Brian to answer. Post that in. And while they're doing that, since it is August and we're about to start the school year, what do you think are the most critical things for teachers and administrators to consider in planning for this inquiry intentionality?
I'm going to go right to the curriculum. What are the resources? You may not know what students you'll have, but you definitely will know the topics, the aims, the objectives that you'll be teaching. So I think having a very dedicated and considered focus on what is the scope, sequence, the learning outcomes that you expect for this upcoming school year is a great starter to the conversation for most administrators and teachers.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's to make sure that, just as Brian's saying, that you're putting in the hands of teachers the resources that they will be expected to use, but your focus is on how can I learn about these resources while thinking about the students in front of me, and beginning the practice of making sure that there's that lens, that it isn't just I'm going to learn the manual, but I'm going to learn the manual in service of knowing that these are the kids I'm going to be using this with. And so that starts to open up the other questions teachers fairly have at the beginning of the year. And that's why I would say, if you really want to provide teachers with that feeling that there is an opportunity for me to think with others in a problem-solving way, I would really check myself and think about my professional learning system and where is that able to happen, and be able to identify that. And then to start to talk about that time as the time where we do learn together. And that's what begins to make a shift in how the time is used.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think that if districts
How to
and
answer that
campuses,
question though, and like looking in the mirror, is there a time? Really? Is there a time?
yeah. Well, and if you can get the culture established and have the conversations now before we know the students, right? Before they come, then it leads into continuing the conversation. So you don't always have to have some, famous person come in and do your professional development or whatever. It's the looking at the work and having that principled conversation and collaborative discussions that sometimes will move the campus and instruction and student achievement actually forward. So anyway, well, thank you all so much for taking this time with us. Lee and Brian, it has been a tremendous joy and honor to have you join us and share this fantastic insight into best practices and the whole approach to making sure that we are on board and ready to go for the school year. So I really appreciate you doing that as well. Here at Education Advanced, we make it easier. And so our evaluation tool, which is growth-based, actually has the Danielson rubric and incorporates that framework in. We have a tremendous partnership with them. We also have career and college readiness tracking for students, and then test enablement as well. So our goal is always to make it easier for you to do your job and really focus on students. So again, thanks for joining us for this series, and have a great start to 2024. And Lee and Brian, again, thank you so much for being willing to share your insight and such valuable knowledge.
Well, thanks for the invitation. Have a good one.
All right, everybody have a great
Bye-bye.
start. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. If you want to learn more about college and career readiness, graduation tracking, teacher growth, assessment coordination, be sure to subscribe to our newsletter. Until next time.